is your usual suspect. Just give me a second as you guys are joining the broadcast. Let me also be trying to get to something here just in a bit so that we get it all started for that big night between Arsenal and Real and between Real Madrid and Arsenal, because they have it all to do at the Santiago Bernabue tonight, and it's going to be quite impressive. So, anyways, good morning once again. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back from last night's action in the UEFA Champions League, where we did witness Aston Villa stand PSG, although they were unable to knock them out of the competition, while Dortmund also put Barcelona literally through the sword, beating them by 3-1. But unfortunately for them, it was not just enough to see them through. So, where do we even get it all started? Let's start it with sort of a brief review of that action from last night. Of course, we did do the biggest part of the reviews in the aftermath of the game. That was late, deep in the night, post midnight. For those that deal with the East African time, it was beyond midnight at the time, and quite very impressive. I thought Aston Villa had a very electric start in the first 10 minutes, but while they were doing it, because they were really pressing PSG to get that first goal as early on as possible, so that perhaps they can upset the PSG game plan, the PSG morale, and that kind of thing. So, but every time they did that, I sort of felt I did see their vulnerability, because they were committing so many numbers up front, and I was thinking to myself, they are leaving themselves sort of vulnerable or a little too bare when it comes to their backline and that kind of thing. Of course, Unai Emery had started with a double pivot of Amadou Onana and Boubacar Kamara in that double pivot with Yuri Tillemans, Jacob Ramsey, and John McGinn joining them ahead of that double pivot. And I was thinking, okay, I see why he needs the physicality. I see why he needs the box-to-box energy to get all this, running. And it worked beautifully for the first 10 minutes. And then in the 11th minute, Marcus Rashford concedes possession, and our worries in that moment came on to pass. PSG ran onto the other side, and of course, Aston Villa, because they couldn't defend well, Pau Torres, a culprit in that particular, moment. And then more so, the goalkeeper in Emiliano Martinez sprays the ball in the direction of Achraf Hakimi, who fires it in the back of the net, and suddenly it's 1-0. Of course, Martinez tried to get up really fast to see that he can get a second rebound of a save, but the ball brushed his shin and it was 2-0. So it sort of sent a bit of unrest within the Aston Villa team, and you could see that. Thank you guys for all joining the broadcast. Kindly subscribe, kindly comment, share. I can see Anandla. Yes, I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you for tuning to the broadcast. So, and then in sort of similar fashion, while Emi Martinez was to blame for the first one, in sort of similar fashion, then again, they tried to push for that equalizer to get themselves back in the game. And in quick succession, okay, couple of minutes later, and then still they were caught on the run, on the break. And this time around, it's Ousmane Dembele providing the assist to Nuno Mendes, and suddenly it was 2-0. And then you're thinking, oh, whatever game plan Aston Villa had prepared themselves for is now out of the window. This game is being put to bed. So suddenly, I really saw the reason for me continuing, watching that game as closely as I was, because I thought the tie was good as done. So I turned to the Barcelona game, as I told you last night. And then Barcelona were on the other side being put to the sword themselves. Okay, they were losing by 0-0. But anyway, fast forward, in the second half, shortly after, I think the halfway mark or the half-hour mark, Yuri Tillemans with a deflected ball of William Pacho, You know, they pull one back and it's 2-1 because Yuri Tillerman strikes the ball. It's deflected on William Pacho. Light of the annihilation. Thank you for tuning to the broadcast and thanks for your comment. Much appreciated, brother. So, and suddenly it's 2-1. So we go into halftime and it was 2-1. Then whatever talk Unai Emery had with his boys in the dressing room clearly worked because they came back in the second half with a lot of firepower, and it wasn't long when John McGinn does score to restore parity, and suddenly it's 2-2, and then it's 5-3. Yes, it's 5-3 on aggregate, and then just a couple of minutes later, Enzuri Konsa, yes, scores another brilliant strike, and they lead that game 3-2. And you're thinking to yourself, it's game on, and indeed it was game on. For the rest of the game, they did try to push for that, you know, that fourth goal that would then restore or equal the aggregate score to 5-5, and that goal just did not come. But PSG will have a lot to thank for Gianluigi Donnarumma, because he made so many saves, at least to keep them in the game. There was that brilliant attempt from Marcus Rashford that he saves, and he keeps, you know, PSG in the game, and a lot of other attempts, of course. While William Pacho was a culprit in the first half with the final kick of the game, literally, he's the one that puts in the block that, you know, serves PSG, and then they advanced to the semi-finals in brilliant fashion, beating Aston Villa 5-4 on aggregate, but it was a victory for Aston Villa 3-2 on the night. They'll be proud of their performances, or their performance on the night. By all measure of standard, in comparison to what PSG were able to do at Liverpool, I think Aston Villa will really be proud of themselves for what they were able to do on the night. They will be disappointed that they had to concede to early goals that sort of ordered their game plan and that kind of thing. But anyway, like I said, we'll move away from that really, really fast. And then Barcelona, of course. Barcelona had a bad day of this because they just gifted Giraci for his hat-trick, a player who, by the way, was firing blanks just a couple of weeks back in March, in the March international break against the Uganda Cranes, was the one scoring a hat-trick against Barcelona in quite spectacular fashion. Of course, particularly for me on the third goal that he does score, it was Ronald Araujo who made the mistake, because instead of clearing the ball far out of the area, he basically cleared it in his path and it fires home. But of course, equally Dortmund were hard done by their own goal that sort of made it 2-1 at the time when they had halved the aggregate score, and eventually they were knocked out 5-3 there on aggregate score. So, like I said, we won't really talk much on those fixtures from yesterday, but I thought those few facts were worth mentioning to this. But it's Real Madrid versus Arsenal. We all know that Arsenal go into this return leg with a 3-0 aggregate score, and it's going to be tense inside the Santiago Bernabue. The Santiago Bernabue, a place where many people believe that miracles happen, a place where they believe that such results can get overturned to their favor, a game that has inspired so many mind games from the Real Madrid side. I've never seen Real Madrid be this rattled, as far as I can remember them in my own history of following football, because not even Barcelona that did rattle them this way in terms of playing the El Clasico. Mind you, we do have another El Clasico to be played for the Copa del Rey final. But I've never seen Real Madrid be this rattled. They're pulling all kinds of moves. Players have come out to say that this Arsenal game is the only thing that's been on their minds. Of course, over the weekend, they managed to beat up against Deportivo Alves by 1-0. And of that game that did see Kylian Mbappe be given a straight red card for his very dangerous tackle against one of those Deportivo Alves players. Now, of course, the Spanish FA have come out to clarify, to say that he will only miss their next game That's as far as La Liga is concerned, and then he will be available for the Copa del Rey final. So, but anyway, that doesn't count much because he is available for the Arsenal game because that red card does not stand in the UEFA competition. So it's going to be something for us to focus on. Anyway, for some of the mind games or some of the things that Real Madrid have told us they intend to do or they have done in the build-up to this game. One, there's been a great deal of dressing room talk among us players. I do not know. Literally, I think every Real Madrid player has turned themselves into a motivational speaker. We've had a very lengthy talk that Carlo Ancelotti had to give to his players. We've also had maybe for the first time this season, or I do not know, but at least we've had rumors that the president, in Florentino Perez, did attend one of Real Madrid's training sessions and that kind of thing. So that communicates to you the kind of the kind of mood that is in the camp. Yes, they are geared up for this game, but it comes with a lot of tension. It comes with a lot of pressure because they are eager to overturn that result. Can they do it against Aston? I mean, you'll give me your predictions, as I'll give you my own. But those are just some of the things that they've done. In the pre-match press conference for this particular game, Carlo Ancelotti was saying that this particular game, whether they win it or they lose it, it has no bearing on his future as a Real Madrid manager. Of course, there's been a great deal of speculation that should he be knocked out of the UEFA Champions League and they miss out of the Spanish La Liga, which, by the way, did come out to say that they have everything it takes within the squad to win both titles. That's the La Liga title and the UEFA Champions League. That should he miss out on all those titles, maybe even the Copa del Rey, then he could be shown the exit at Real Madrid. But that's all speculation. Again, we'll wait to see what Florentino Perez decides at the end of the season. But remember, it's going to be a bit tricky. Why? Because as soon as the season ends, Real Madrid have to go and participate in the FIFA Club World Cup. So then there's been talk that Real Madrid are going to close the roof. You know the new revamped or refurbished or rebuilt, whichever way you want, or remodified Santiago Bernabue has a closing roof. Now, they say they are going to play this game with the roof closed. Why? I do think that they are trying to sort of close in all that Real Madrid noise, the Hala Madrid anthem and everything that comes with it, to sort of, be the bees buzzing in Arsenal players' ears and that kind of thing, and create every sort of hostile environment that you can think about inside a 70,000 seater stadium. I think 80,000 or so. So seater stadium. That's the kind of environment that they want to create. Never mind that Arsenal do have their cohort of traveling fans. I do not know how many seats they are allotted really, or how many they've been able to get in terms of, for this fixture. But I do know for a fact that Barcelona fans have been also gearing up for this game. Some Barcelona fans will be at the Santiago Bernabeu to cheer on Arsenal. We all know the rivalry between Barcelona and Real Madrid. We've seen videos and footage of Barcelona fans with the Declan Rice t-shirt, that Jazz 41 singing Declan Rice, chants and all that kind of thing. Now, again, it tells you the caliber of game that Arsenal and Real Madrid are going to be engaged in. All rivals of Real Madrid in the Spanish La Liga are sort of ganging up against them to support Arsenal, show support for Arsenal, and that kind of thing. Dani Ceballos, a former Arsenal player, of course, he was on loan from Real Madrid, was also speaking and saying the first 15, 20 minutes of the game will be very crucial. And that is true. That is true. Pretty much something similar to what we saw in the two games yesterday, because within the first 11 minutes, PSG had scored against Aston Villa. Borussia Dortmund had scored from the penalty spot against Barcelona. So, and sort of those minutes kind of dictated how games went on. And for Dortmund, they dominated Barcelona for the rest of the game, at least from what I observed. And then for Aston Villa, they sort of capitulated in those 10 minutes after conceding that first goal, and they went on to concede the second. Until then, they regrouped and found a consolation through William Pancho's, through Yuri Chilaman's deflected shot. So that kind of thing. So hey, a lot has been said about this fixture. So much has been said, and then there's been this rumor of how Danny Ceballos. I would want to think this is all banter and everything that comes with, the game of sport, the game of football, that of how, Danny Ceballos was at Arsenal and he told Real Madrid about Arteta's tactics and that kind of thing. So all that expectation is there. All that mood is there. We all know that Eduardo Camavinga is not available for this particular fixture because he did get a red card in the first leg, but they do welcome back Aurelio Tchouameni, who was suspended for the first leg. Speaking of suspensions, Arsenal will play this game. I do not know if it will have any bearing whatsoever, bearing in mind that 4 of their players are potential candidates of missing the first leg of the semi-finals should they advance. And those players are Gabriel Martinelli, Thomas Partey, Julian Timber, and I think Declan Rice. Yes, should they get booked with yellow cards and Arsenal advance, then they will miss the first leg of the semi-finals. Of course, we all know that PSG have since advanced, and whoever advances between Real Madrid and Arsenal will face off with PSG, and whoever advances between Bayern Munich and Inter Milan tonight will also face off with Barcelona on the other side in waiting. So let's move forward still about the particular fixture. So like I've said, all sorts of mind games have been said. Then the other thing that we've had is that Real Madrid players intend to come onto the stadium using a different tunnel than the one they normally use. Again, all these are mind games, trying to get into the heads of Arsenal players psychologically and sort of intimidate them into sort of submission. But I mean, you're talking about senior players, you're talking about internationally capped players, you're talking about players that have been in all sorts of hostile environments. I do think really that will not really have much bearing on them. Maybe what could have a bit of bearing for them could be the exponential noise that you get at the Santiago Bernabue. Similar to what you get at Anfield. Of course, these are stadiums you really never want to visit at the quarterfinals or semi-finals of the UEFA Champions League. Anfield, Santiago Bernabeu itself, Signal Iduna Park, the Allianz Arena, or on that night, in the San Siro. It's not to say that you cannot get a result there, but usually these are stadiums that you go to and they create for you that kind of environment. In any case, Arsenal fans created that sort of environment where they were buzzing all sorts of noise, like bees in that Emirates Stadium in the first leg as Arsenal won by 3-0. So all that is there. So let's get to the tactics, to the pitch, the players who are available, who could start, who may be out of it, and that kind of thing. Where do we start? Let's start on the side of Real Madrid. Like I said, Eduardo Camavinga is out of this one. Does David Alaba start at left back? We are waiting to see the kind of decision that Carlo Ancelotti does make in that starting lineup, because he did not really have a good night versus Bukayo Saka. Fortunately for him, Bukayo Saka was forced off with a knock in that one, or what he felt as uncomfortability in that game. But we did see him get done by Bukayo Saka at least on more than 2 occasions. And it was Bukayo Saka's trouble that led to the free kicks that Declan Rice went on to score. So it was that difficult and even for David Alaba. However, in their game on the weekend, they did start with Fran Garcia at left back and Lucas Vazquez, I think, at right back. So, and then of course, Raul Asensio partnering with Antonio Rudiger in that back line. Then they had the midfield of Fede Valverde, Tchouameni, Eduardo Camavinga, Adagula, and then of course you had Vinicius did start, but it was Mbappe and Rodrigo Goes that did start that particular fixture. So That was against Deportivo Alaves. Could they feel the same team with the exception of Eduardo Camavinga? I'd say definitely not, because Jude Bellingham didn't start that particular fixture. And we all know, again, players were being rested in preparation for this big night. Why? Because Madrid believe miracles happen at the Bernabeu. They believe they can do it against Arsenal. They have the inspiration from Barcelona from 2017, when Barcelona went to Parc de France and lost to PSG by 4-1, and then came at Camp Nou and or Nou Camp and overturned that 3-0, that 4-1 deficit, and by beating up against PSG by 6-1. Yes, and Edson Cavani scoring what turned out to be the near consolation for PSG. Never mind that he missed a goalkeeper to beat against, I think, was it Andres Stegen? Yes. So Luis Enrique, who is a PSG manager, was on the touchline or on the technical bench for Barcelona at the time. Neymar scored a free kick in that one and also scored a penalty. Lionel Messi scored a penalty. Then I don't remember, was it Sergio Roberto who scored that sort of sixth goal in that fixture? Of again a free kick that was floated in the air. So Real Madrid have those examples. One, they also have the example of AC Roma when they upset Barcelona. We all remember, that historical chant or commentary by Peter Jury against Manolas. So that kind of thing. And then you do have, of course, the history with Liverpool, them overturning, again, Liverpool versus Barcelona. That was in 2019 at Anfield. You do have the incident of Liverpool versus AC Milan when they went by 3-0 down in the finals in Istanbul. That's 2005. So you do have all these precedents that have been set that it's doable. So Real Madrid have all the inspiration to go on in the world that there is for them to, to do it. And if there is any team that you think can do it in the UEFA Champions League, then suddenly it's the Real Madrid. The question is, can they do it against Arsenal, a team who have not conceded more than 2 goals in the last 79 games? The last conceded more than 2 goals in the game in 2023 when they beat up against Rotterdam by 4-3 in the Premier League. For those of you that do remember, I think it was Declan Rice that scored the winning goal in that particular fixture with the header of a Martin Odegaard, free kick. So that was the last time Arsenal conceded 3 goals in a fixture. So ever since then, they've not conceded more than 2. Of course, on numerous occasions, they've conceded 2, including this very season when they conceded 2 against PSG in that 2-2 draw at the Emirates in the reverse fixture at the round of 16. And then, of course, that was the only time they've conceded 2 goals in the UEFA Champions League this season. On the other occasions, they've always conceded 1 goal, one against Sporting Lisbon. They were beating Sporting 5-1, then losing to Inter Milan by 0-0. Then in some of those fixtures. And then they did concede against Girona in Spain when they won 2-1. So they do not concede a lot of goals. And yet you have Real Madrid on the other side that are also known for scoring many goals. But Real Madrid also concede plenty of goals. As we come to see, they've conceded what? Now 20 goals so far in this season in the UEFA Champions League, and they've scored 28, 19 of those coming between Rodrigo, Vinicius Jr. and Kylian Mbappe. Mbappe and Vinicius scoring 7 apiece, Rodrigo scoring 5. So again, there is plenty to talk about. So when I look at the starting level, and this is my prediction for a starting level, based on what could happen. Thibaut Courtois in goal, Antonio Rudiger and Raul Asensio in that centre-back pairing, then Lucas Vasquez at right back, and then Fran Garcia could start at left back. But then when you start Fran Garcia, you do lose the attacking threat that David Alaba may offer you when you go forward, because he's good, at the offense, that kind of thing. But that's my prediction. Anyway, should it be otherwise, do not be surprised. Then in midfield, I do expect Aurelio Tchouameni, Federico Valverde to run that box to box kind of thing, like he's, I don't know, a camel that can walk miles in the desert without drinking water. And then Jude Bellingham at the tip of the double pivot. at the tip of a double pivot. So I'm thinking we are going to go with a 4-3-3. Again, this is my prediction. Or, and if they go with a 4-3-3, or if they could also use a 4-4-2, sorry, a 4-4-2 like they did set up at the Emirates. For those of you who remember that Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. were playing as the twin strikers in the setup that they had. So, but if it's going to be a 4-3-3, of course, the front three will be Rodrigo, Koech, Vinicius Jr., and Kylian Mbappe at the center of those two. Now, should it be a 4-4-2, then in midfield, in addition to Federico Valverde, Jude Bellingham, and Aurelio Tchouameni, the experienced Luka Modric could be slotted in, and then you kind of have that hybrid midfield. And we then know that Jude Bellingham is playing as the 10, then these are the 3, and then you have Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. Of course, that means that Mbappe can go wide, Vini can go wide, and then suddenly you have Jude Bellingham running as your false 9 into that box centrally. So that's the speculation, or that's the kind of lineup that I do expect them to have. Or that's what I predict. On the side of Arsenal, the game does come a bit too early for Jorginho, who suffered a chest injury in their 1-1 draw against Brentford over the weekend. He seemed to struggle to be breathing while he walked off that pitch, and he went straight to the dressing room, I think, to get more medical attention at the time. So I do think I do think they will miss him because of his experience. We all remember he was part of that 2021 UEFA Champions League winning Chelsea side that beat up against Man City by a goal to nil. That goal scored by an absent Kai Havertz, who is at Arsenal at the moment. And then we had the potential absence of Thomas Partey, who suffered a knock again in the same game against Brentford. However, we did see him in training yesterday. He did return to training and that kind of thing. So will Thomas Partey be fit enough to start? I do think that whether it requires injections, they may have to do it or to take it, and they failed him to start because they do need him. You do need a player like Thomas Partey to win balls back in that midfield, to progress the ball, because I do think he could be arguably the most progressive midfielder who plays as a holding midfielder. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. He plays as a pivot midfielder, but when it comes to progressing the ball forward, I think he could be one of the best that there is at that kind of attribute. So again, then Ben White was spotted in training, but with a strap on his knee. So I do not think he will be available to start this one, but he could make the bench if he does feel better. And then, of course, Bukayo Saka also did walk. He's okay. He has no issue. So starting level for Arsenal: David Ryan goal, William Saliba in that centre back pairing with Jakub Kiwior, Julian Timber, who I do think, again, I'll say this, that who I do think is playing through injury, because how many times have we seen him in the last 3-5 games or so get a knock, needing medical attention, limp a bit, and then he comes back on to play, and that kind of thing. I think we've seen it one too many times in recent times for me. So I do get the feeling that he does play with an injury of some sort. Whether he's relying on painkillers and anything in that region, we do not know. We can only speculate. But I do think he will start at right back, and then Miles Lewis Kelly to start at left back. Of course, over the weekend he was rested. It was Kian Tierney that started at left back. Ricardo Carafiori, unfortunately, the fixture does come too early for him. Ever since he returned from the international break, he's been out through injury. Which injury we particularly do not know, but suspicion had it that it was something to do with his knee. And then in that midfield, so let's for 1 second take the assumption that Thomas Partey is not fit. In the event that Thomas Partey is not fit enough to start this game, then you'll see a pivot of Declan Rice, Mikel Merino, and Martin Odegaard in that midfield. And then the front through Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Martinelli, and Leandro Trossard. But if Thomas Partey is fit to start, then it will be that, midfield of Thomas Partey, Declan Rice, and Martin Odegaard, which is the one I'm going with essentially. And then Mikel Merino as the first 9, Bukayo Saka, and Gabriel Martinelli. So do let me know whether you agree with that lineup or whether it is the one that you fancy. If you're an Arsenal fan, if you're a Real Madrid fan, you agree with the lineup that we just discussed and that kind of thing. Then what else? Of course, the battle will be in the midfield. Who wins that midfield battle? Arsenal won that midfield battle in the first leg. They controlled that midfield battle. If you control that, then you will have the game in your stride. Then the other thing is that Real Madrid tried to sort of press Arsenal from their build out of the back, and they caught them on, I think, on 2 occasions, especially in the first half. In one instance, it was Martin Odegaard who lost possession and he caught out of possession. Martin Odegaard himself, by the way, returning to the Santiago Bernabue, where he moved as a 16-year-old from the Norwegian league. And I do remember at the time when Real Madrid signed him, Arsenal had been very interested. Arsene Wenger had monitored the player. He really wanted to sign him. Of course, he went to Real Madrid, played a couple of games, but that team was too good for him to find. His 14 eventually went on, loans here and there, including the most successful ones, I think, for a season and a half at Real Sociedad, where basically made his name when he was playing alongside Mikel Merino, Martin Zubimendi, playing with Alexander Isak, who is currently at Newcastle, and that kind of cohort of players. Of course, Nacho Monreal moved to Real Sociedad, I think, around that time or shortly after his exit. And then, of course, he joined Arsenal on loan for, I think, for half a season, and then he was signed on to Arsenal fully. You all remember Arsenal waiting to decide whether they should sign James Maddison or Martin Odegaard. And of course, Mikel Arteta was hell bent on signing Martin Odegaard. And then, he held his ground and eventually got his man towards the end of the window and that kind of thing. So that's all that I can tell you about this particular fixture. What are your predictions? That's the big question. What are your predictions for this particular fixture? Like I said, the first 15-20 minutes are going to be very crucial. If Arsenal avoid conceding in the first 15-20 minutes, it will help them grow in the game, grow in their confidence, whether they are the ones dominating play, whether they're being dominated in terms of being played. That first phase will be very important. And in the second half, regardless of what the score line is, whether it's Madrid leading by 1-0 or by 2-0 by halftime, the first 15-20 minutes in the second half will also be equally important. What do I think? I do not think Mikel Arteta will set up his team to just sit back and defend the way they did against Manchester City in the first leg at the Etihad Stadium when they drew that game 2-2. Of course, they had suffered a red card to Leandro Trossard. But I do not think that we are going to see that kind of Arteta side. One, I think they will play with precaution. They will look to exploit Real Madrid when they overcommit their numbers, because Real Madrid will be wanting to get that goal. We saw what happened over the weekend when David Raya collects that ball off a corner kick, and then he sees the run of Declan Rice, throws him the ball. Declan Rice goes on the run. Thomas Partey is, racing in the forward direction with him, and then he goes on to score in quite brilliant fashion. So they may look forward to such moments. They may entice Madrid into committing their numbers in front, and then rely on the pace of Gabriel Martinelli and Bukayo Saka to run at them, to take them on the counter. That's one of the strategies that I do think that, knowing that they are away from home, I do think, and this is my suspicion, is that if Real Madrid start the game as the dominant side, they will be okay conceding possession to Real Madrid, to let Madrid dominate the game in terms of ball possession and that. But what they will keep doing is interrupting play, intercept it, kick them, knock this player down, and sort of have that stop restart kind of game. The kind of game that Chelsea, a vintage Chelsea or a Jose Mourinho Chelsea or whatever Chelsea that you can remember would have played against a Barcelona side, a prime Barcelona side of Pep Guardiola. That kind of thing. A kind of side that would have played a prime Manchester City, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, or Pep Guardiola or a Bayern Munich. What? Keep on, making tackles, tagging the player here and there, sort of try to annoy them in a way. But then Arsenal will also have to defend, knowing that one, they kind of have vulnerabilities defensively. When it comes to Miles Lewis Kelly, he can be a bit hot-headed in the sense of being too passionate or wanting to show that zeal and ambition, which then causes him to make dangerous tackles. Then you do have a Jakub Kiwior, who we know has not played plenty of many games, so he's trying to really fit into this team. Like he's trying to grow with games, with fitness, with stability, with game reading, because he's not played a good number of games this season, and he simply came on against Fulham and he started ever since then. So he has to go in that character. So William Saliba has to really be close in terms of commanding him, in terms of directing him, in terms of deciding who is the sweeper is, who is the last man is, which I think in this particular case, Jakub Kiwior becomes the sweeper and then Saliba is the last man standing. Kind of where you have Gabriel Magalhaes going for all the physical duels, sweep that one, tag them, push them to the floor, and then have, William Saliba collect the pieces in that kind of sense. So you have those two vulnerabilities. But also what I do think is that whenever Arsenal will be in possession, is that they'll create a back three. Julian Timber's movements will be quite limited. So they will create a back three where William Saliba is at the center of it, and then sort of Jakub Kiwior drifts a bit to the left, and then you have Miles Lewis Kelly, just much like he did in the first leg, drifting into the midfield, creating a double pivot with him and Thomas Partey. If it's Thomas Partey that starts, if it's not Thomas Partey, maybe Declan Rice, and then have the other two Arsenal midfielders push themselves further up front to join the front three in terms of press, doing the high press, trying to win that ball back in the high areas and cause Real Madrid problems. So I do think that's the model in which they will try to play. And similarly, like we said, Real Madrid will try to exploit on any vulnerabilities of Arsenal wanting to do that ball from the back, but also they will have to be worried that while Arsenal have that as a strategy, they also have a very decent goalkeeper that is good at playing the long pass. Even Jakub Kiwior has it in him, although he doesn't do it very often, but he has that long pass that he can, pass into the channel to Saka, to Martinelli, to Mikel Moreno, to run forward too. So while you think of the high press, you know that Madrid will have to worry that Arsenal do have that in them. Can Madrid pull it off and upset Arsenal? Most definitely they can. Do I think they will be able to do it tonight? I think at the end of the 90 minutes, Arsenal will have advanced to the semi-finals of the UEFA Champions League to face off with PSG. That's what I think. Final score, Madrid 2, Arsenal 1. That's my prediction. I could be wrong, but it's going to be a night of tension. It's going to be a night of nerves. It's going to be a nail-biting night. Arsenal players will have to rely on those few thousands of Arsenal traveling fans, maybe 3,000, maybe 4,000, maybe 5,000, if you count in all the rival, Real Madrid fans that are pitching in for this one. They will all be there too. I think Arsenal players will need that noise, however small it may be, or they will, however small they will be in numbers, they will need them to be their loudest to try and have that noise penetrate through the Bernabeu to get to the players. That's all I think. Do let me know what your predictions are. What are your views on this particular fixture? I do remember weeks back when I made my first video in preview of this whole double tie between Arsenal and Real Madrid, and I put out why I thought Real Madrid would be scared facing off with Arsenal. And we talked about Arsenal's defensive prowesses, Arsenal's set piece play, when we talked about that solidity and cohesion that Arsenal do have, among other things. And then we talked about the history between the two sides of how Arsenal knocked out Real Madrid in 2006. That's for the 2005-2006 season, for which Arsenal went on to reach the finals, in which they lost to Barcelona. We spoke all about that. And people dismissed me that I was in over my head, seated somewhere in the comfort of my room. They are telling them of how Real Madrid should be scared of Arsenal. Real Madrid, who have won 15 UEFA Champions League titles, when Arsenal have nothing to show for it. Well, at the end of the first leg, it turned out as white. Those people were sashed into silence. They had nothing to say. Anyway, that was my expectation. But also, I did a second video, and if you do have the time, kindly go and check it out on the channel, where I also give the 5 reasons as to why I do think that Arsenal will be scared of facing off with Real Madrid at the Santiago Bernabeu. That video is up on the channel. And we talk about, of course, Madrid's experience and seniority, their pedigree in the competition, the tactical astuteness or capabilities of the manager in Carlo Ancelotti versus Mikel Arteta, who we all know is a novice, is looking to guide Arsenal to their 3rd semi-final in the history of the UEFA Champions League, because the first came in 2005-2006 season, I think, and then the other came in 2008. For those of you that do remember Arsenal, it was Arsenal versus Manchester United, and I think 4 Premier League teams had reached the the semi-finals of the UEFA Champions League. I stand to be corrected in that one, but I do think Chelsea on the other side were facing Liverpool. Liverpool, who had lost to AC Milan by 2-1 in the 2007 finals. So Arsenal lost, of course, to Manchester United at home, across the double tie, including that spectacular free kick from Cristiano Ronaldo versus Arsenal's Manuel Almunia in goal. For those of you that do remember, Manchester United donning that old blue kit. So that's the second semi-final of Arsenal that we do remember. So Mikel Arteta is looking to make history. Last season they bowed out at the quarterfinals stage after knocking out FC Porto at the round of 16. They faced off with Bayern Munich, who knocked them out. And then again last season, I was speaking about that Bayern Munich fixture with Arsenal, and when the draw was made and Arsenal were to face Bayern Munich, some Arsenal fans were happy because Bayern Munich were not having a good season. They looked out of, they looked like the shadow of the Bayern Munich that we do know of. Bayer Leverkusen was dominating affairs over in Germany. And then again, people dismissed me, saying that I was, relying too much on history. Of course, the last being that Bayern Munich had knocked out Arsenal at the round of 16 on a 10-2 aggregate score, and that kind of thing. So I gave my reasons then. At the end of the double tie, Bayern Munich were into the semi-finals. Arsenal had been knocked out. Turns out as white. And I think Bayern Munich were facing what? Real Madrid? Maybe. So, anyways, again, I could be right on this one. Like I said, my prediction is that Arsenal will advance to the semi-finals at the end of the 90 minutes, or even if it is extra time. I do not suspect that the game will go into extra time, but we will review it when it is played. But before I walk out of here, guys, do not forget, Inter Milan are also up against FC Bayern Munich. They are at San Siro. I know Inter Milan prefer to use a different name when they're the ones hosting, but they didn't share the stadium with AC Milan. And just was it a couple of years back they were bickering. They wanted to redo the stadium, and then there were discussions of how it's an antique, historical, monumental place that shouldn't be demolished, and kind of changed. But that's the debate for the Italians. We'll leave it to them. So we all know that Inter Milan do come in this fixture with that 2-1 aggregate score that they carried from the first leg after beating Bayern Munich by 2-1. They needed that late goal to secure victory after Thomas Muller had scored to restore parity around the 85th minute or thereabout, and then we do remember that Lisandro Martinez had scored to put Inter Milan in the lead in that very entertaining fixture. So I think what unders Bayern Munich at the time, again, it's quite important, is the lack of experience of the manager in Vicente Kompany. We all know this is his third season as a manager in Europe's Big Five leagues. Of course, he started off in Belgium, I think, with Anderlecht, and then goes to Burnley, where he earned them promotion into the Premier League, and then the subsequent season managed them into relegation back to the Championship, and then he got, of course, in the summer of 2024, the job for for Bayern Munich. So Jan Stommer in that Inter Milan goal is my expectation. Alessandro Bastoni in that back three, alongside Francesco Akabi and Benjamin Pavard, and then Carlos Augusto, I do not know, and then Henry Mkhitaryan, Hakan Çalhanoğlu, Nico Barrera in that midfield, Matteo Damian, Simone Inzaghi, like many Italian managers, including the sacked Thiago Motta, who was at Bologna last season and then Juventus this season. And then Ancelotti, they love that back three. So that back three with wing backs playing alongside a midfield three, then Marcus Thuram and Lautaro Martinez leading the lines for Inter Milan. I really do not expect that lineup to change unless there's any news of regard to injuries. And then, of course, it was Fratesi that came off the bench, replacing Henry Mkhitaryan, who came off the bench to score that winning goal for Inter Milan in the first leg. Then on the side of Bayern Munich, of course, they've missed their senior player in Manuel Neuer, who is a very experienced goalkeeper. Then Konrad Laimer, Eric Dyer, Kim Min-jae in that defense, Josip Stanisic, and then Leon Goretzka in that midfield alongside Joshua Kimmich in that double pivot. Michael Olise, of course, they do incredibly miss Jamal Musiala, and then Rafael Guerrero and Leroy Sané in there. I think they missed Serge Gnabry. No, Serge Gnabry did come off the bench in that one, as well as Thomas Muller in that first fixture. And then Harry Kane to lead the lines. So, but I would want to think that he may make a change, maybe swap Rafael Guerrero for Thomas Muller. You really need his experience. I know he's 35 years of age, and Inter Milan are really going to run you in the ground, but he could potentially use his experience and that kind of thing. So, anyways, but they'll have a rich bench of João Paulinho, Serge Gnabry, and the likes, and whoever. While Inter Milan, Federico Di Marco there, of course, Marko Arnautovic. Some people even forget him, former Stoke City player, and I think he also played for West Ham. Yes, he also played for West Ham. So, guys, in that particular fixture, given that Inter Milan do not concede so many goals and away goals rules no longer count, I do expect Inter Milan to advance and face off with Barcelona in the semi-finals. My prediction is that they could win it by 2-0. Do let me know what your predictions are for that particular fixture. Otherwise, we are we are 15 minutes into the broadcast, so allow me close it here. Thanks to all of you that were tuned into the broadcast, and those that do watch it much later when we're done. I do not take your time for granted. So have a wonderful rest of the day. Let's enjoy the fixtures that will be coming our way tonight, and wish you the best of luck. Bye bye. Have a wonderful day.